We're going to spend the next hour talking about tenant satisfaction, corporate responsibility, and you'll see we kind of move the conversation around. So if there's something that I say or there's something that the panelists say that doesn't make any sense, don't be shy. Raise your hand. We'll stop. We'll circle back and hopefully clarify that which made no sense to you. First thing that makes no sense to me is not having a slide up. So first of all, let us thank our sponsor, which was here before, right? Yes, there we go. So thank you, and greatly appreciated. We will hear a little bit about what Lobos is. I was quizzing him before, so he is ready to give you that answer in a second. So thank you for taking the time and coin of the realm to come here. And this is actually kind of working. It's a little scary. Thanks to the AV guy. Okay, so lightning round. We're going to go down my left, your right, left to right. Introduce yourself. So who are you? What do you do? Where do you do it? And who's going to win the final four? Those are the four questions, okay? So start to my left.
Hi, I'm Ray Bustinger. I'm president of Interalliance, and Interalliance is the company behind Lobos, load-based optimization system. And basically, it's HVAC intelligence that delivers comfort, energy efficiency, and demand response. So that's kind of the sponsor thumbnail of our commercial product. Personally, I've been serving commercial facilities in matters of energy efficiency and operating efficiency for 25 years. So my career has been serving really the industry that caters to commercial real estate owners. So on this panel, I'm hoping to bring the perspective of the other side of the coin on ROI is the people that are challenged with delivering that ROI and hopefully prompting a decision from the facility owners to execute something actionable.
Okay, so I'll jump in there. So commercial and residential, or mostly commercial?
Commercial, purely.
Okay, and who's winning the final four?
You know what? I don't even know who's in one. San Diego State.
Somebody's got a Florida
Yeah.
tie, so I'm thinking that you want to go with Florida? Okay, so that's one vote for the Gators.
I'm going with the Gators. There we go.
Awesome. John, to you.
All right, John Scott, Senior Managing Director for Colliers International, and I'm from Florida, so you can guess.
Nice.
So that's two votes, all right? So they automatically
So far,
win
you're
at
good.
this point. So I represent our global sustainability practice group in Colliers International. I've been involved in the commercial real estate business, and Colliers won the Big Four, which I have. The largest of the Big Four sitting next to me in CBRE. Our goal and objective is to provide our clients and our tenants with sustainable opportunities and options to where we can grow their business and at the same time meet our core goals and objectives. Doug Fry, who's our global chairman, was a founder of the World Green Building Council and is very active and involved and likes to enlighten me on what's going on in Europe and also in Asia with the changes that are happening. And Dave has given me a beautiful example over in Scandinavia where they're light years ahead of us, where we believe, we're all on the cutting edge. And when you go out and you look in the world, you find out not so much, and we have a lot of catching up to do. Our goal from this panel, from my perspective, is to give you some ideas of what's happening out there in the real world. I heard density brought up in your previous panel. I plan to address that in real everyday life, objectives and challenges that we have to overcome.
Super. Mr. Dave, what's going on in your world?
I'm Dave Pogue, the Global Director of Corporate Responsibility for CBRE. We are the big one. And Global Director of Corporate Responsibility sounds like a cooler job than it really is. I'm actually a real estate guy. I've been in the real estate business for 40 years this August, which is a scary thought. I was 11 years old, and that's about back when they allowed children.
Did you say big guy or old guy?
I'm an old guy,
Okay.
is what I really am. But that's when they allowed children to work in the business, and so I was very fortunate to get an earlier start. My job currently is inward-facing. We are a very large company. We take sustainability and corporate responsibility very seriously. And as an organization, we have a number of programs and protocols and processes that we're trying to inject across. We as an organization recognize that we have both an opportunity and a responsibility to be a leader in this. And so we work very hard to do that, but I'm sure we'll have some discussion about how hard that really is. And that's where I say it sounds like a better job than it might be. But as I say, I do come out of the real estate side. I ran half of the country for property management. And it was out of that we began to develop our protocols and programs and the like. So I have some actual real world knowledge. Also, again, about how difficult then that it really is. So we'll get into a lot of those discussions. I want to prompt all of this by saying how difficult it all really is so that you all understand that when we keep coming back to that. And I think, since the fact that my brackets have all been totally busted up, that I'm going with the Stanford women to win the Final Four.
Nice, stepping out there. Very impressive. Jim?
My name is Jim Young. I'm the Vice President of Corporate Facilities and Real Estate at Marriott. And when people ask me that question and then they go like this, tilt their head to the side, I say, if it's not a hotel, then I may have a responsibility for it. And so I know this morning Randy Gaines did a great session. He's from Hilton, former Marriott guy. Talked about Chris Nacetta, former Marriott guy running Hilton now. Randy talked a lot about the hotel business and industry. I'm going to try not to do that because I'm here talking about commercial real estate. And I have a little bit of a bipolar disorder in that we are a big tenant. We occupy about 2 million square feet around the world. Half of it's tied up in our corporate headquarters campus in Bethesda, just north of here. And we're also a subtenant in a building that Lance helps us out with also, about 300,000 square feet. I said subtenant, I meant sub-landlord. And so we lease space. And I was a member of Marriott's original Executive Green Council, which got started in 2006 as we developed sort of our platform that led to where we are nowadays.
So winner of the Final Four?
It'll be the Kentucky Gators.
Nice, the Kentucky Gators.
The SEC rules.
A true politician there. So we'll go, as we did the earlier panel, we're just going to disregard the questions that are up there. We'll come back to them in a minute. Just curious, so 06, Marriott, sketch out for us, how's that conversation start? So there's a bunch of people in a conference room, I suspect, or one or two. Give us that story.
Well, there were several smoke-filled, well, not smoke-filled rooms.
Not at Marriott.
Right. Where people got together, and I have to confess that in some of those early meetings, 2004, 2005, I sat next to senior executives as we talked about the greening of Marriott and the greening of the globe, actually. And some of them would lean over and say to me, how long is this going to last? As if it were, as it appeared to in the beginning, to be a fad. And we hung in there and stuck with it, and of course it became a trend, and now it's a way of life.
So did the C-suite buy into it pretty early on, or was it kind of an evolution?
We were very fortunate in that back then Arnie Sorensen, who was our CFO, but obviously a favorite son in the company, he's now our CEO, bought in very, very early. And as I tried to move forward and initiate some strange things that we had never done in the past that were a little counterculture to the old-fashioned way of doing things, people said, well, why are you doing this? And I'd say, because Arnie said so.
That always works.
It always works.
Yeah, up on high is a good thing. So Dave, how about you? How'd that start
It was interesting when he said 2006. There must have been something in the air or the water, because 2006 was the exact same year that CBRE got interested. And how CBRE got interested is that we got pulled into this to some degree by our European folks, and to your point. And what we were beginning to see for the first time in the 2006 timeframe was for any mandate or any service in the European market, question number one was, who are you? Question number two was, what are you doing about sustainability? And if you really didn't have some kind of a good answer about question number two, then you didn't go on to three and the rest of them, because the Europeans were well ahead of all of this, and they were beginning this. And so we were beginning to hear this from our European friends. And so our company began to take this quite seriously. And so they put together a global group of folks, and I was fortunate that I was already in the asset services, property management world, building some stuff, some structure on this, and so I got invited into this group. But it was led by our CEO. In fact, our CEO at the time, Brett White, who I found out during the course of this, had his degree in biology, but it was from the University of California, Santa Barbara, so I think it was really more like, out swimming kind of in the ocean. But
that counts.
But he did have a degree in biology, and he actually cared about this and was pretty passionate about it. And so the company, as we were going through a variety of things that we were going to do, he wanted a big, bold statement that the company should do. And none of you will remember this because we've tried to make people forget it. One of the things that we decided in 2006 or 7 that was going to be one of our environmental policies was that we were going to be carbon neutral. And there was a discussion in the group about, well, no, that's pretty bold, and I think we should do like 10%. No, let's, and I remember Brett White on the phone, and he would only kind of call in just to kind of say, no, do this. He was on one of the calls, and he said, no, we're going big, we're going bold, and we're going to be carbon neutral. Make that our mantra. So we did that, and we declared that we would be carbon neutral by 2010. The year that we announced that, it was in some area, we got some award that it was the most dramatic green press of the year, in the real estate press, that we were going to be carbon neutral. Once we got involved in that, we realized how hard that all was, and we could have a discussion about that for about an hour. But it was from the top, from Europe, from the top, carbon neutral, 2006.
Nice. Okay, so east to west. John, how about you? What do you
Well,
think?
instead of dealing with Colliers, I'll talk about the industry, and one of our new educational partners, BOMA's here in the room, Karen Penafiel and Scott Morris, but in 2007, we launched what was the 7-point
Giants in the
challenge.
sustainability industry.
Yes, giants in sustainability. And I was the chair of some sustainability committee that put that together. And we started feeling the upward trend that Dave's referring to that was coming from Europe and the undercurrent of
John,
all
about the same
costs.
time,
About-
06?
Yeah, 06, 07.
Okay.
We started developing in 06, and in 07 we launched it. What we're feeling now, though, is it's some organizations becoming a part of the norm, and some organizations, in our opinion, it's still rejecting it for numerous reasons. And using a Carl Sagan term, there's billions and billions of data points. But which one are the most important? Today you've heard about all the data and the big data that we're mining. If someone can come out and grab those points and show us the information, and it shows us the way or shines that light, it would be phenomenal. I think a lot of organizations are impacted by when you shine the light, you shine it too far, and what they see is a strategic plan that goes on so long and is so expensive instead of that first step that you have to take, and so they're resistant to that change. I think we're starting to see that change in the industry right now with some of the success that we've had, but it's only those who are willing to go into a strategic plan right now that have moved forward. And I don't know if you see that too, Dave.
Yes, we'll come back to that. We talked a little about this morning at a different panel on incremental progress. So dealing with kind of things that are manageable bites versus going big and making a big statement, which is also relevant. So we'll come back to that because that's an interesting thematic on how do you really change an industry, change a marketplace. But Ray, how about your company? Technology-centric, obviously, but where is it being driven by, it being sustainability, energy efficiency, and the care of it?
So I think most of our clients, Brad, are they're starting with a cost reduction focus, right? But it's hard to put that ahead of the quality of the environment and maintaining, high performance environment. So you really 10 years ago, if you would have asked me, it was cost focused. Today, it's equal balance, I think. One example of this that happened about 2006, about the time you had the question, how long is this going to last? And it was a real commercial example of that shift. We're working with Caterpillar Logistics. They're industrial facilities. So they have about 20 facilities throughout the continental United States that are about 500,000 square feet each, where they stock all the replacement parts for their heavy equipment around the globe. So very interesting operations. But we were involved in rolling out a particular wave of technology through those energy retrofits. And it was the first time. We usually get a portfolio list. We get our sample batches. We do a couple sites, and then we come up with our square foot equivalents, and we apply it to the whole portfolio and say, here's your triage. Let's pick the next set of targets, right? And always it's on the best return on investment, the most dollars. And these are big projects. These were $500,000 projects we were doing per site with 2 to 5 year simple paybacks, good return on investments. So they got the list, and never seen this happen before. They said, I need you to sort it a different way. Go by KWH, forget about the dollars. And they picked out the worst project in the batch. It was like a 9-year simple payback in York, Pennsylvania, with cheap energy and no rebates, but it had the biggest kilowatt hour reduction by far out of any of the other sites. They said, this is our next project, and the reason why was they had made a commitment to a certain amount of greenhouse emissions reduction, and they were motivated, they were making business decisions based on meeting that commitment. So
Fascinating. So, all right, so let's play with that. So we'll go back down the row. When you're dealing with clients, are they dealing with we'll call it bottom half, bottom third, where you move kind of 20 percentage points and it's meaningful? Or are they dealing with the trophy class and how to get the Energy Star label, which is relevant, and or how do you get a LEED certified? So what are you seeing?
Well, and you're talking about ownership, and
Yeah.
because when I look at clients, I'm looking at the tenants also.
Fair enough. So either side of that
Either
coin.
side of that coin. Going from the client side of it, and just to use what we use in the industry standard, we have Class A, B, C, and D type projects, and speaking mainly to the office component at this moment. The Class A projects, I would say more than 80% have already achieved, you say, a trophy status, and we're talking about downtown core, Class A plus buildings. A lot of them are speaking on the panels that we've had earlier today. So I would say the majority of those have achieved their goals and objectives, and that's because the money that's invested in them comes from the higher end, the sophisticated organizations. Now, as you start moving down that asset class, you start finding ownerships that maybe have less sophistication or maybe not the financial wherewithal to move it forward. So to your point, they don't look at what their goal and objective is. Say if it's carbon reduction, they wouldn't make that type of goal and commitment. They would have to make a commitment such as lighting, where you have a payback that's 3
little
years or
short.
less. But on the other side of it, from the client perspective, how long are they going to own the asset? And I know Dave and I face that all the time. The first thing we have to find out is what can we put in front of them? They're going to hold it for 10 years. I mean, GSA you can go to and say, get a 20-year commitment from. A lot of the investors out there,
Your tax
you're getting
dollars
a
at
fund.
work.
Well, that's our tax dollars at work. It was a beautiful building today in the presentation they showed. I loved it. But when we go into our tenant classes, we have the owner occupied. That's where we have the most representation of sustainability objectives that are put into action, because they're going to live and breathe, and their clients are the actual tenants of the building. So if you go to an Adobe, which I was involved with, and you look at their project, they tell all their employees that they're the client, so that's their feedback. They run the organization to a certain degree. Those are the easiest to make a change with. But again, going back to the sophistication of the client. If you have a multi-tenanted building, and I know all of us struggle with this, how do we go in and understand the business purposes of all those clients and how we can affect their ROI or their bottom line? It's not necessarily by making the asset more efficient, even though our client may be looking for that to be achieved. We were talking today, what's going to be one of the biggest changes will be the sub-metering with the wireless sub-meters to everyone and defining the energy hogs versus the light users. Well, that's going to change the industry. How many people want to see that occur? And then we get into whether it's a mandated issue or versus an industry marketing issue.
Jim, how about you? At Marriott, big portfolio all over the globe. Are you dealing with the top half or the bottom half or both, and how's that decision get
Well,
made?
historically, when we first started thinking about this, it appeared that, that this industry was going to be regulated. And it appeared that it was going to happen fairly quickly, and it was going to be measured in a carbon footprint. And so we spun our wheels for a while trying to figure out how to measure that, and we really weren't very successful because we did it a couple of different ways, and they came up really dramatically different. And so while some of the folks on the team were working on that, sort of the rest of us said, well, let's just get started. And in that regard, we looked at the low-hanging fruit. Okay, what's the easiest thing that we can do that will have an effect, and we'll just check it off and move on to the next one. So we started with recycling programs, and then water savings, and then we changed all our incandescent light bulbs to, so it was just one bite at a time
Showing progress.
from the bottom up.
Okay, and was it across the portfolio, or did you pick certain assets where you knew you were going to hold, or a different strategy to deploy the capital?
Well, in Marriott, our larger full-service hotels are, well, first of all, we don't own anything. We own a couple of hotels. But the larger hotels are usually owned by large financial institutions, and we manage them with a long-term management contract, 10 to 15 years. That's where we have the most control, and that's what we went after. Some of our limited service hotels, you see them franchised more often than not, and we have less control over those. And so we concentrated mostly on those things that we had the most control over.
Dave, what about for
Well,
your
yeah,
portfolio and the big clients you're working with?
Well, and it's a theme that I might overwork today to some degree here, but my concern is, I've now been in this for 7 or 8 years, kind of doing this, and we had this hope that it was very egalitarian, and we're going to move all the bottom fish up, and we're going to improve all God's buildings. I've come to
'Cause
recognize...
he's a fair master, that's right.
Yes, I've come to recognize that isn't happening. This is a very bifurcated market. It's bifurcated by cities, it's bifurcated by client types, both on the occupier side and on the ownership side. You know, we hear the P&G story, we heard the Microsoft story. You don't have to, these guys are leading us. I mean, these are industry leaders, and they're very smart about what they do. Last year, 2013, every company in the S&P 500, reporting company in the S&P 500, except for one, reported either to CDP or GRI, and most of them reported to both. All right, so the big companies in America, around the world as well, but in America...
Pause for 1 second. So CDP, just for the uninitiated, Carbon Disclosure Project, GRI, Global Reporting Initiative,
Sorry.
2 separate kind of how one measures performance and carbon.
Right,
Keep going.
these are reporting protocols showing how good we are. We're doing a study as part of a major kind of work that we're doing, and we're going to release, and I won't tell all the numbers here because we want it to be so exciting when it comes out in about 3 weeks. But what we've looked at is the growth of green space in the 30 top markets in the United States from 2005 to fourth quarter 2013, so a 9-year period. Starting at literally almost zero. There was almost no LEED certification whatsoever, a little bits we added here, and there was an okay kind of acceptance of Energy Star, but a very, very small numbers. To the current number at the end of 2013, almost 17% of all buildings, and this is CBD districts, the 30 CBD districts, mostly Class A, B kind of stuff, 3.5 billion feet, so it's not a small sampling, but 3.5 billion square feet. In those 30 markets, 17% of all buildings were green, either by Energy Star labeled or LEED certified of some sort. But the interesting point, the more interesting point, is by square footage, 46% of the market. 46% of the market in the top 30 are green by square footage. They're already there. And they're very happy to be there, because now what they want to do is they now want to report on that to GRESB, Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, another protocol on the ownership side. I mean, these companies that are participating now are proud of what they've done. They've been ahead of the curve to some degree. They've created some pretty good stuff, and they're now good enough. The rest of the mess, that's where it's now a retail business. So I think everybody believes in some ways, you're big, we're bigger, you're big. But in the end, everyone thinks that we can move this. Just go to Marriott. I mean, you guys can just green up everything. Well, we just heard, you can't. It's franchise, you're this. We understand, because some people are going to own the building for a year, 3 years, whatever. We don't own any of this stuff either. And so what the problem is that to get to the rest of the mess, it is a retail business. It is not a wholesale business. It's a retail business. And it is going to be hard fought to get to the retail business, because we need every time to figure out what is the motivating factor. What's the ROI, or how do you meet? And, oh, by the way, they're not filing CDP. They're not filing GRI. They don't really care about what the world thinks about them. They're dealing in an individual market. They're dealing with their client base, et cetera, et cetera. They're dealing with their cash flow. That's where the problem comes.
Okay, so then we'll go, as usual, we'll go completely off the board and talk a little bit.
I was hoping we could get them off these
Yeah,
questions.
who wants to just hear about this stuff? Paybacks, yawn, and life cycle analysis. And so let's talk then about mandate versus incentive. And so what you're talking about a bit is we got the 9 cities in the United States, kind of East Coast through Minneapolis and Chicago as well, Austin, and then on the West Coast, both California, state, but also San Francisco and Seattle with energy disclosure mandates. We've got kind of in those cities, is Jean here? Where is she? Yes, Energy Star, Queen. Those cities requiring benchmarking off of Energy Star. So you got this convergence of 9 cities, 2 states, Energy Star disclosure. We've got some movement with respect to, in certain states and or municipalities, of electric codes getting harder. And so do you think that those convergent forces, some big Fortune 100, 500s, playing in CDP and or GRESB, as well as Energy Star type disclosure mandates, and brokers like yourselves getting more immersed, even though at particular, offices, people don't know what the hell we're talking about. But for the most part, the brokers are becoming more educated to this. Is that shifting the market quicker in the last 5 years than, say, the last 10? Do you feel it's gaining in velocity?
I think he's talking about your brokers or my brokers?
All of them, all of them. Your guys are great. It's everybody else.
Yeah, no, all of our brokers, both of our brokers are. First, the comment on mandatory or whatever, Karen is here.
I know, so I'm trying not to look at it right now.
Karen is glaring at me here, but I am a big proponent on mandatory because I think that's what helps move the rest of the mess. We can have a discussion about that, but I think that's what we need to be because that at least gives a platform and at least it gives everybody an opportunity to understand where people are. And I would also tell you, not just because our friends from EPA are here, but the first thing that we did 7 years ago was go out and begin to benchmark our buildings. If you don't know where you are, maybe you're afraid of it, but once you get past that, if you know where you are, then you can begin to make decisions based on that. It's a very simple sort of thing. So I want to encourage the market to get to there. To answer your specific question, we're going to be looking, because we're going to continue to do this quarter over quarter, and so we're going to very carefully focus on those 9 markets that have the mandated requirements just to see if there's a difference in the way the adoption of Energy Star is in those markets, et cetera. Most of them are still too young to have a real effect. I mean, California just went into effect January 1st, and some of the others are kind of lagging. So that's going to be a very interesting thing for us to look at over the next 3 years, because I would love to be able to go to the critics of all of this, to be able to say, with mandate, it's X% higher, faster, better than without mandates, to see that it does move a market. Because right now it's our expectation, but I don't know that we have the facts.
Dave, are you guys going to track occupancy, vacancy, as well as asking rent?
No, we're not actually looking at any of those. We're
Okay.
just looking at the Green Building
Numbers.
Adoption Index because we want to see, because my message back to my brokers or to my clients is, if you're in the market, and you're going to be staggered by some of these numbers. I mean, the city of San Francisco and the city of Chicago each are more than 70% of their CBD district are green. If you are going to buy a building in that market without expectations to taking it to green, you're crazy. If you are a broker and you're not understanding what green means and the implications of that, then you haven't fully done a good job for yourself. Or your client.
I totally agree with you. I'd footnote that if you play with the GSA, lease or
Exactly.
deal with them, you best be
Well,
playing.
and those are kind of the things that we're beginning to write. We're writing 30, I don't want to take too much time here, but we're writing the 30 individual markets. And some of the rationale for the markets, San Francisco, very high profile, class 1 city, lots of institutional and European market, offshore market that buys these, that care about. So there's a lot of reasons for that. If you're looking at DC and the markets, it's to a great degree because of what the occupant demand is here in DC.
Yeah, again,
So
it's
there's
just,
different reasons for different markets, but
so I'd say, look, if you're a numbers person, so again, there's like 5 million buildings, commercial buildings in the United States, 70 billion square feet, give or take, although somebody said 100 million over lunch, but we'll say 70 billion. So you look at Gene's numbers from the EPA and Energy Star, so there's 5 million buildings. There's like 280,000 buildings, give or take, round numbers, that are Energy Star benchmarking, 280 out of 5 million. But those 280,000 buildings represent 40% of the market. So to Dave's points, which is spot on, you take 9 cities and the big buildings in those cities, you can really kind of get a lot of very robust data and start to really move action. Are you seeing the same thing, though? I mean, do you think, John?
Oh, definitely, but we're talking about market-driven too. I know Dave mentioned mandate. I consider that market-driven also. In Miami, when I was running Florida for CNW and I was heading up their global sustainability, we saw 3 buildings coming out of the ground in 2008, just before the cliff hit with the recession. And they wanted to make differentiators for their buildings. So the first guy, all 3 of them came out without issuing that they were going to be LEED certified. And then all of a sudden, they're trying to get tenants in a very difficult climate. So they started going, one announced they're going to be silver, so within a month, the second one said, well, we're going to be gold, and within 2 months, the third one said, well, we're going to be platinum. And they differentiated the market. What happened with the existing marketplace? Every building that competed within their core, between the tenancy and occupancy, decided we're going to go. I took Wachovia Financial Center, which is the largest office building in Florida, to a LEED Gold. I'd talked with J.P. Morgan for 3 years prior to that. The market changed, and all of a sudden, they were willing to invest whatever they needed to make that change. And you've seen that occur also. But back to the point of the 9 cities and our states, a lot of them have put in the requirement for EPA Energy Star but they don't necessarily follow up with any policing action. So if you go into Seattle right now, are they mandated to do it? But only 40% have turned it in voluntarily because they're not even, there's no policing action to force them to do it. So I think it's also about how it's structured, and you made that note, how they put it together on a mandated issue. But I think the market can drive the change also.
So again, we're among friends. Nobody will say anything, and nobody will tweet out. Do you believe in a mandate versus incentive? Are you okay with mandatory?
Well, I need to go back to, we started what we called the green building program with CNW, which during the recession was dropped because values changed so dramatically. There was no way. We were trying to find, just like Dave is looking at now, also in releasing, do you see value increase in the buildings?
Mm-hmm.
And we went across all the major markets in the US, the metropolitan markets, and we took 30 markets also. And we're evaluating at that time. From 2007 to 8, you started to see an incremental increase in the buildings that had some form of structure in place for sustainability. And then after 2008, it fell off the cliff because everybody was trying to retain tenants. They were actually negotiating lower leases, and you didn't see the exchanging of buildings. I couldn't tell you how much the building grew in value. I think that's back into the marketplace now where we'll be able to tell. But where does that lead us to? It leads us to the core A-plus buildings. When you go out into the suburban marketplace, what's driving value, which I mentioned earlier, is the densification of those projects. And when we get there, we'll have that discussion.
So let's go there. Ray, are you seeing, so what they're about to hit on is, we're seeing kind of in the office environment at least, and in some other of the food groups, more people in smaller space, more kind of benching, more kind of shared hoteling, people telecommuting. So what does that do to the technology? Do you think that the existing technology, HVAC and/or controls, are sufficient, and people are thinking about that in the design as we try to jam more people and be more efficient into buildings? And does that drive people to need your services, or is it still, you've been busy forever and whatever?
Right. It's an interesting question from a HVAC perspective, because if you truly succeeded in increasing density by a large magnitude, that's going to change the design standard. You know, the building was designed for a degree day with a certain amount of occupancy. So if you compress that, you get a lot more density, systems are going to be challenged to keep up, and that's going to make optimization a lot more important.
So are you seeing clients come to you and say, help me, because people are driving into 150, 180, square feet per person, or not yet?
I have not had that specific reason for needing HVAC help.
I think that's coming. All right, so guys, let's hit on that for a second. Any pressure with respect to Marriott to jam more rooms, or it's just?
In our office space,
Yeah,
definitely.
I was going to say not in the hotel side, but in your office side.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll plead a little bit of ignorance here. I don't know how our systems were engineered. I hope there was a little fluff in it. And because we're not going to go out and replace
All the systems.
existing systems, especially in big buildings, but we can tweak them. And hopefully, little adjustments here and fine tuning will get us whatever we need on the worst day of the summer.
And Jim, are you seeing in your office space that 2 million square feet, give or take?
Yeah.
So are you seeing in that environment more of this benching, more of its shared space, more of the telecommuting than you saw a couple years ago?
Absolutely.
And continuing to drive there?
Yes. Mhm.
How about you guys? And big users all going there, or is it kind of mixed bag?
Well, we're not a big user. We have 4 million square feet globally, so we're not ourselves a huge user. But we think that we're kind of a leading edge user in some ways. And our corporate offices that we just opened in October of last year at 400 South Hope, we totally changed the configuration. And some of you are in these same kinds of spaces. We've got the big egos on the corner. Well,
What?
everywhere along
Nobody
the window
else has
line.
that.
Everywhere along the window line. It's an old line brokerage company with old line thinking. And we decided that we were going to go to the European model. So we have our European cousins in Denmark have this.
We have some late arrivals, excuse the
Totally.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Deb.
Come on, and there's front row seats for you.
So we have this totally open space now that took people from 250 per square feet probably down to 175. And the most important thing is that it's 100% free address. Not only do you no longer have a private office, you no longer have an office. You no longer have a place or a space that you come to every day. It's really creative. It's trying to be the Google sort of fashion here, where there's these creative collisions, not collusions. I started to say earlier collusions, but it's actually a collision, where people are sitting next to people, seeing people that they didn't ordinarily see.
Did you see it as was a culture shock when that first occurred, or
Well,
how'd it go?
It wasn't to a great degree because this was worked on for more than 2 years. They took a lot of these egos around the world to take them to our offices, to take them to furniture places, to take them to Google, to get them involved in it. More than a third of the people in our office were part of the team then to kind of create the office. So they lived this for a while before they lived it. They tore out spaces in our existing space and kind of created what it was going to look like. And when it opened, I mean, the word was that I heard that within 2 hours, everybody was up and working. Because they had already kind of moved their one file box. That was all you were allowed. And so it wasn't a very physically difficult move. But that's the wave of service companies. And to another point, though, and this, in addition to just density, one of the things that I think is going to move this industry, and when we try to figure out what the next is, you know, and I preach about this too much too. Energy costs $3 a square foot. Rent costs $30 a square foot, and obviously that's around wherever it is in the. If you have $75,000 a year employees or $100,000 a year employees, your occupancy cost is $300. So you're $300. We focused a lot trying to cut 10% on the energy, and I think that's admirable, and we need to do that. But at the end, if we can figure out the 300, and it's about efficiency, it's about productivity, it's about retention, recruitment because of the workspace and all of the environment that we're creating. It's about health and welfare, about cost for health insurance and the like. That is where the focus now needs to be. It's about occupant experience, and part of it is around density. And particularly if you're going to take somebody out of their private office, you're going to have to give them a bunch of other cool stuff, you know, so that the occupant experience is improved. But in the end, that's the real crux to this whole story.
So John, talk about your guys' office for a minute, and then talk about kind of what you're seeing with your clients, same kind of from an occupancy density perspective and sharing.
Sure. Well, and then we're going through some of the similar challenges that Dave's already faced. In some of our offices, we've changed into a hoteling concept. I just like the term hoteling concept, you know.
It's a good word.
But because when you go in and you plug in, it's immediately your office because you're recognized by everything that is where you're located. So I just call it a transitional office because I move from office to office right now, but then I have to set everything up. And in our new offices, once the IP address is identified, everything comes to my desk and there it is. I just don't have the pictures on the wall and everything else. And we're doing that in 3 offices. We've already achieved that in Atlanta, and it's very functional. What I think is the behavioral modification of this, to Dave's point, I asked him, how many brokers have yours left? Because our brokers have all said to us, well, you know, if I don't get my office, I'm probably going to go to another company. And I asked him, you know, they had 6 months in LA, and he says not a single broker is left. Well, once you get past...
Not a single has left, not a single is left.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Make sure that the tape says that.
The
properly.
I got you.
The future is now.
Like Blake said, there's not a broker left in LA. No, but
Tweet that out.
Yeah. So behavioral modification is we're in a transitional stage between generational gaps here. One of the bigger issues we face, and there's a story in the Bible about where they came out of Egypt and they all had to die before they could go into the promised land, right? We're trying not to achieve it by
So you
the
get everything
changing of
here.
the
We got
guard.
Bible references, we got Final Four, it's all happening. Sorry.
But what's happening is by creating these interactive spaces, you're getting through osmosis and general conversation, people starting to transfer knowledge from the different bases. And I think they enjoy it after they give it an opportunity. And I'm looking forward to that, even though there are bumps and challenges in doing that. Now to the densification on our client side. Last year, I've had to price out through our project management 3 or 4 buildings. We had this discussion earlier. 200 square foot per person was what we used as the rule of thumb. Now it's 120 per square foot and below that point in time. What have you done to the building? To your point is it modified the equipment's capabilities. Can it stay up with it? And you need more fresh air. You know, if you're going to put twice the amount of space. But what are the other issues? I had to get 4 parking garage bids last year because you also went from a 3 to 4 parking ratio to a 6 to 7. Okay, there's energy also consumed in parking garages. So it has an effect throughout the building. I talked to elevator companies are having issues with elevators because they're only supposed to make so many trips during the day. Double those trips, what occurs to your building? So it's an overall strategy that you have to look at. from what we've seen in the call centers, and particularly its call centers, they're going out to suburban marketplaces. They're asking for you to put up these garages, and then they're impacting a building. What is the effect is that? Someone was talking about the cost of energy per square foot, and I believe it was Bob Peck today who said, if you reduce your square footage, in this case, you reduce it, your energy costs went up.
Because the intensity, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's a major change, and when we start to evaluate numbers in the future, we're going to see that. And then also in attorney spaces, I think you've seen all their libraries have disappeared. All the filing has went to the cloud. You're not seeing the open space it adds to occupancy, and I think it's going to continue. In new development, it's going to be it's very easy for them to take that into account. But when you build for 6,000 to 7,000 in a parking garage, that's why there's very little development going on at this point in time. And you upgrade the systems to handle it. And in the 80s and 90s, we built the most building stock that still exists today that has to be transitioned. As we said, all the core has been transitioned. What's left? B, C, and D. And what's impacting that? Densification.
Well, then to you, Ray. So are you seeing, kind of to come back to where we started a little bit, are you seeing a pickup in velocity of people that need the service and are interested in automation and technology to hit on whether it's A, B, or C? But in particular, do you see more people interested in what we're talking about? Do you feel that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's almost it's not mandate driven. There's almost a market mandate that people feel like they have to have an intelligent building. And it's interesting because oftentimes that's not really, ultimately there's dollar savings or operational efficiencies or enhanced environments at the end. But really what's getting people, what makes the phone ring and the calls come is, I need to have building intelligence. Everywhere I look, it's analytics, it's dashboards, it's bench. What do you have for me to meet that need? So, and the outcomes are vague. People are very disoriented as to, there's all this intelligence, but what does it mean, right?
I read a quote recently that I thought was really pretty cool. It says that the future is already here. It's just not very well distributed. And I think that is absolutely the truth. When you walk around this conference or any other of these kinds of conferences that I go to, first of all, I'm not a technical person at all, so all the technology blows me away. The answers are there. I mean, there is so much good technology that's already in existence that if that were just somehow, if we could just put that in, but the problem, again, is inertia. I mean, there is the 80s and 90s stock that is standing, and to my point earlier, it's good enough. I mean, if you're managing a building or owning a building that has an Energy Star score of 87 and maybe is LEED Silver or LEED Gold, you're good enough. You're probably not going to go out and redo the mechanical system, particularly if it has 13 years more life in it. You're probably not going to redo the lighting unless it's demanded by a tenant. I mean, it's good enough. So, I mean, that's, again, part of the kind of the dynamic of this.
Okay, so not to debate you, because I agree. But Dave Borchard's walking around Tower Company. So Tower, just as a footnote, so I agree is the premise. But Tower with NRDC took 3 Energy Star rated buildings, so like an 87, a 90, and a 93 in that zip code. And with a company, an external company, I think it was AdSite, they focused attention and sort of said, look, you're getting these pictures. These pictures are telling you this. So not only are you seeing the picture, but we're going to tell you what you need to do. And so marrying the ability on an action item with the picture, they drove another 12% savings off of Energy Star. So it's going to.
I'm familiar with those actual ones because actually Dave and I are both subject matter experts working with BOMI on their high performance. And so in my book that I'm reading through this and there is that story, with that company. In fact, they're saying this is too much of a commercial, and so I'm actually trying to take it out. You know what? There is again though that very leading edge company with an interest in telling that story also, and maybe even knowing where their marketplace is. I think these might have been in Atlanta. I can't remember where they were.
DC,
Were they in
around
DC?
here,
All right.
outside the city, but
Okay.
around here.
So the truth of it is, again, that these are very special places. This is where the future is. Okay, that's where the future is, but it is not very well distributed, and it will be a long time before that distribution happens.
Fair point. So back then to Marriott on this distribution question. So not all properties are equal. Some get better treatment than others. Some have better managers that whine more. How do you find that capital allocation when it comes to energy? Is it coming through your group, or is it still being driven off of the asset managers with a little bit of boot on the throat or other body part?
They don't look at it that specifically. they're out there trying to run their hotels, and, you know, they'll look at their capital budget and say, the roof is 20 years old and it's leaking, we'll replace the roof. Now, if we want to put in extra installation, then you've got to account for that. But there's no specific sustainability budget per se. It doesn't come out of a fund like that. It just, they try to deal with it as they see fit.
And so are they looking to your group to help them justify numerics on just any capital project?
Yes, yes, they do. And we have an in-house architecture and construction department that helps owners with that. We also, a couple of years ago, were the first lodging company to work with the USGBC in developing a pre-certified set of building plans. The first one was Courtyard, and we now have 5 of our limited service brands. It's called their volume build program. And so if these plans that we've developed, we gave them to USGBC, they go, yes, if you build this hotel, it will be LEED certified. And so we offer that to our owners, and we have some that are very anxious to go ahead with that, and others that aren't.
So then back down the row, what are you seeing by way of standard payback, and are people, so are clients, for the most part, looking to you guys to help them with that payback analysis? 1, 3, 5, longer? And second part of the question, are some people actually looking at life cycle analysis? Mr.
I'll let
Fogue.
you take that.
Okay.
Because I've had too much to say.
Go ahead, John.
Sure. Well, it's according to the client, typically, so, you know, that just gives me an open leeway there, but a lot of them are running 5 to 7 year sales cycles at this point in time. They open a fund. I do have some funds that go longer, which is 10+ years, and those, you know, none of them reach life cycle.
So they're not getting there yet, okay.
We're not getting there yet, but I have a significant amount of GSA buildings where we do include life cycle analysis as part of the information or the data points that we give them. And just recently, we had another LEED Gold building in Tampa that we did, but it's mainly occupied by the GSA, so they supported that, and they re-upped their lease for a couple 100,000 square feet. So, you know, what is the ROI to us? We kept them in tenancy for another 10 years. They always have a 6-month out, you know, so they can go after that point in time, but it makes sense for us. When we go to the other clients, so the investors and the funds that are 5 to 7 years, typically I'm just looking at doing a lighting analysis for them, even though I'll go through the entire process, and I have project people who work on that for me. In presentation, you can see what I call the blue screen. When you get past a certain time period, you see this blue screen come on and they're not paying attention to you. That's when I stop and say, I think we've talked enough about these data points. What drives that, though, isn't necessarily ROI. Can I show them the significant value increase in the building? That's what Dave was mentioning earlier, and I was talking about. How do we start justifying these investments by showing them when they sell this product that they're going to make more dollars in their pocket off of? That's one of the holy grail items that we haven't achieved at this point in time, and the recession harmed us in that way, I think. But I think we'll start building that analysis. Nick's group is probably very close to being able to do that because they kept, you know, core buildings. They tend to hold them for a longer period of time. And they're probably going to be able to come up with their own internal analysis at some point. But I think that'll be a driver when we see it, and then anyone will be open to looking at it. My second point on that would be when you start going down the A, B, C, or D building types, A's typically have significant amount of money to invest, so they don't go out and finance it. They take it out of their pocket, they pay for it, but they get the return off of it also. That works well. Once you move down the scale, B, C, and D buildings, those funds typically don't have the money to invest in it. Or if they had to go out and finance it, how do you finance that package? And I've worked with the DOE on many financial packages, met with Citibank, Wells Fargo, and the problem is they don't know how to rate the risk on that type of investment. And I know you struggle with that same. So I can't even go out and get the financing. If you have incentives, you go to California or some of the other incentive intense places, then you may be able to offset it with the incentives, and then it makes sense to do it. So,
so you feel like so stratification of product type, class A, B, C,
client type.
client type, and 3 to 5 to 7, depending on, you've got the head of the class up front.
Right.
So he's gonna go a longer payback. Most are still in that 3 to 5, if not shorter
Government
period.
academic, I work for the universities also, you'll see that life cycle analysis considered.
Ray, how about you? When the clients are talking to you, are they willing to go out 7, 10, or are they still in that 1 second to 3 years?
So as a generalization, and this isn't
Yeah,
gonna
it's
be
a broad.
shocking, right? People buy in the 2 to 5 year range. I mean, that's the generalization. But I think my experience has been that there's another factor that goes with all the economic metrics. So there's return on investment. Well, if you could deliver a certain 15% return on capital to any investor, they'd say, hey, great, sign me up. How much can I get? You know, I can't, but then you look at it in payback and, well, that's not an exciting, simple payback, right? So there's a lot of different things going on, and as you mentioned, being able to justify this on the capital value of the business or the value of the building, right, with these measures in place, hey, what's the increase in valuation? That's another element. When you take all that, everyone's gonna have their financial priorities that make this different, but the factor that gets overlooked is the confidence factor. So a lot of times people will buy a 5-year simple payback project if they're very, very confident that it's gonna deliver the results. But if they're squeamish about it and they're scared of the technology, or they're not certain that they can find capable people to execute it, they're gonna want that, and that's where you get the stereotype. Give me the 1.5 to 2 year simple payback, because even if I completely screwed up my analysis, there's still gonna be, what if it's a 4-year payback? That's my worst case, that's my downside, right? So I think this confidence thing is, in my experience, I don't feel like lack of capital, people get fixated on, if I can have PACE financing or on-bill repayment or private lending, or, you know, all the financing isn't the issue. People who can afford to own buildings can afford to invest in them. So the capitalization, to me, it's a detail you deal with. It's like buying a car. Do you want to lease it? You want to pay cash? You want to get a loan? If you need a car, you're going to get a car. So I think people mistake capital as the barrier to getting at these type of energy savings projects or technology. Hey, if there's a better technology, I'll do it. That's not it either. Like you said, the future's here. It's just not well distributed. Well, there's lots of technology that people could invest in today. So the big issue that gets overlooked, and it's not lack of will either, but so here's all the things it's not. It's not lack of will. It's not lack of capital. It's not lack of technology. It's fear. If you can get past the fear and you can build confidence, then you can get things done. So
Yeah, I think we overlook that at our peril. It's been my experience for many, many years here that there's very little benefit in heroism. If you knock it out of the park, then there's a little bit, and this is particularly true of my asset manager friends as well. I mean, for them within a company, there's really not a lot of benefit for heroism, but there is a severe penalty for failure. Much greater fear of failure than hope for a big win. And when you combine that, just that natural kind of concern about risk reward with unproven technology, when you're not a technical person. I was talking with the other Jim Young, who I know, and he was telling me that there's something like 57 companies right now selling these integrated black box sorts of things. 57 companies. How do I, as a layman, choose between them? How am I certain that if I convince my client, and he's hard to convince, to spend $1 million on some technology, how am I certain that within 2 years that company hasn't gone out of business because they've lost traction, they didn't get enough scale their sales? So I'm at risk, I'm putting him at risk. Neither one of us are going to do that. I'm not going to put him at risk, and he's not going to put himself at risk, and so we're never going to do it. I mean, it's what winds up happening. So I think we overlook that whole thing, you know, perhaps too easily. Fear of failure, fear of new technology is a huge impediment to moving it forward.
Right, I
Yeah,
also
jump in.
see that.
Sure.
You know, our owners want to see an ROI of 24 to 36 months. The hotel business is a hard business to make money in, and you know, our owners have tenants, they call them guests. They have leases, but they only last a day or 2 or 3. And you know, if a bomb goes off somewhere or somebody invades another country, then all of a sudden the market heads south and could stay there for quite some time, and they want to be very, very confident that they're going to be able to pay for a project in, like I said, 24 to 36 months.
That's fascinating. So that's a great point on the fear, which we don't talk about enough, kind of people's fear of failure and/or, nobody gets put out to pasture for doing nothing. They get put out to pasture for trying something that doesn't work. And so that's a real thing, in particular the property management, engineering. Why should I do something that the C-suite doesn't understand what I'm doing anyway? Longer conversation for a different day, maybe for alcohol later on. The solve a little bit for that's an ESCO. So a performance contract where somebody else is footing the bill and you only pay them back if we're saving on energy, which somehow the geniuses that we all work with, nobody wants to do that in the commercial building sector. So,
Well, and
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to add in that conversation, and to everyone's point, is there's no backstop. That's what you're fearful of. We used to have backstops. I know when I started doing this in the late 80s and 90s, utility companies used to be the backstop. They would run your analysis, they would tell you that this would work, and they would give you a credit on your energy bill, let's say. And that was your backstop. It was constant, you could afford to do it. And this is directly what your point is. Now, there's a lot of new technology, and to Dave's point, we work with the DOE and using the national labs to try and test some of it, but there is so much new technology out there, no one can stay up with it. So how do you certify it, and is there a way to certify it, and then even past that, will it stay in business? I mean, is it going to be a profitable business? So the fears are real, but the lack of a backstop is what I think stops the deployment of a lot of it. And I know you as doing an ESCO type work, where you're charging a percentage on top of it to recoup your dollars, but, that's an interest rate, basically, that you're doing. If you don't have a backstop there, everyone is concerned, is this real or is this not real? And can you sell it, and can you transition it? I mean, is it liquid also? I mean, that's one of the issues they're facing.
So lightning round, and then we'll open questions. So Ray, what's the coolest thing you've seen in a building that works?
The coolest thing you know what is really fascinating to me is the dispatch elevators that anticipate traffic flows. Fascinating stuff. I forget the term for it. Do you know the term, Brad?
No, I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah.
Destination
Actually, some of the Marriotts have that,
Yep.
which is very cool.
Marquee.
Okay, so distributable elevators. How about you, John?
Well, I had these great slides that aren't.
But somehow they're in the ether somewhere.
What I think is we're seeing the greatest impact from is wireless technology. Everything that we're seeing is wireless. Just think about your lives 10 years ago. Hardly anything was wireless this time. Just about everything in our major buildings is wireless. I can walk in with my phone and tell you what the building's doing, what's going on, what lease we're signing. I think wireless has been the major change agent in our industry, and I think it will continue to be.
Okay, Dave, coolest thing?
I'd have to say the wine room in my personal office.
Nice. Now, is that a benching thing, or is that the glass office?
This is my home office that has
Oh, the
a
home
wine
office,
room
okay.
attached, but I don't go out there until after 5 any night, any particular night.
It's always 5 somewhere.
I maybe would add on, and I don't want to just steal this, but what we were able to accomplish, and not just we, but what we were able to accomplish to demonstrate how cool wireless is inside one of it's going to enable these collaborative office space things, where again, we come in and I can plug my iPhone, and again, I am the stupidest person you'll ever deal with in this. You plug your iPhone in, and it's on the double screens, or it's on the big screen, and you can and you're right, it identifies me, it understands me, and I'm on the ability to go from there, and I know that technology isn't even all that, new necessarily, but that is slick, because it makes an office so much more usable, so much more adaptable, that I think that's going to change the way people use offices.
All right, so Jim is a Marriott rewards holder. I love Marriott, and I will always go there. And I love the fact that kind of the conversation on key turning on lights, turning off those little refrigerators that nobody's going into anyway, and the amount of millions of dollars being saved by the company just by kind of integrating the technology. So not to steal your thunder, but what's cool to you at Marriott or anywhere else?
Well, we are working on that, so that smartphone technology of being able to, like the airplane that's landing, that's 60 miles out from the Dubai airport. When you walk in the front door, it'll recognize who you are. You don't even stop at the desk. You get a text message telling you what room you go in. You go up to that room, and the phone opens the door for you. But that's not what I want to talk about.
Go for it.
What I want to the coolest thing that I've ever seen is completely at the opposite end of the spectrum, and Lance, you've heard me talk about this before. At our corporate headquarters, 3,000 employees, 800,000 square feet of space, we self-perform housekeeping. And and our philosophy in the industry is we want to give an employee a full-time job with full benefits. And so they work an 8-hour shift. And what we had been doing is letting the housekeeper start at 6 p.m. and then working until about 2 or 3 in the morning. And at that point in time, we just left the lights on, and because people started coming in at 6. So we went to daylight cleaning. And we bring our housekeeping force in at 1, and they clean while people are working. They don't run the vacuums in your office while you're on the phone. They do that after 6 o'clock, but they are done and out of there at 10:30. We turn the lights off at 11. The first year it saved us 15% on our total energy bill.
That's serious stuff. So the Lance he's talking about, if anybody's interested, is Lance Ford from Palm. And they also helped us, and so I know what you're saying is not BS. So the ability to turn lights off doesn't sound like that big a deal, but think about the 70 billion square feet. Everybody's leaving those lights on, and everybody's kind of leaving there's a longer conversation there about the bathrooms and kind of what goes on in the bathrooms and how they get cleaned at night. But the punchline is by day cleaning. So Lance helped our guys down in Richmond create a day cleaning program. It was a nickel a square foot savings plus the energy. So you're talking about just operational savings as well as energy savings. So there's real power there, but it's, to the earlier points, people were so scared of, oh my God, the cleaner's gonna be there in a day, and the vacuum, and the conference calls, and what am I gonna do? And I'm sure you guys have all seen that YouTube video with the conference calls. That's like my office. And so it's a big thing to sort of get past that, but what people found once they did it was magic. They became friendly with the cleaner. And so then the cleaner becomes part of the family, and they're talking about birthdays and kids and activities, and it's pretty amazing.
Janitorial complaints drop in some
Yeah.
cases by 90%.
It's incredible. So
We
questions.
realized they didn't steal the candy.
It was everybody else stealing the
It
candy.
was your neighbor who stole
Exactly.
the candy.
It's me stealing the candy. Questions in the back, blue tie.
If there was anything you could force your tenants to do, and one way that you could
It's not mandate, this is a gun.
force them to do it, what would you pick and how would you make them do it? What would your mechanism be?
I'll go with higher rent. Higher rent. Jim?
I'd ask them to cooperate on our green initiatives. They're not, some of our tenants just aren't into it.
I'll say it's kind of the same thing here, because we do have a lot of things that we try to promote. But you'd be surprised how one person can literally spoil the entire load of recycling by saying, I don't care, and throwing the pizza box in. Or, if we could just even get past those 3% that are actively negative, if we could get rid of those, then I think, it would be a better place for us.
I'm going to summarize that. I think if some people would accept trying behavioral modification and see how it works, that would be.
Little shocks, just little
Just-
tiny shocks, that's all we want.
Cattle prod.
There's almost nothing, you won't even notice.
I think behavioral modification is the #1 issue we face with tenants.
Ray, anything to add?
So a little bit different angle on the question, because I don't have tenants to ask to do something, but I would ask my clients, who are the real estate owners and the purveyors of energy solutions that would deploy our product. And really, it comes down to the owners. The future is of energy savings, right? Particularly electricity savings, which is where our product plays, is in more and more complex solutions. A lot of the low-hanging fruit has been done, and everything's much more complicated. And I would realize that there's a lot of homework to get at these complex solutions, and don't just look for the soundbite. Because when you look for the soundbite and you look for the short putt, you miss the opportunity. And there's a lot of really, really capable energy solutions providers out there. They're willing to do the work to build the confidence level with you, but you have to give them the time. So obviously there's a lot of unqualified people that aren't worth spending your time on, so you want to choose carefully. But when you find someone who's diligent and is willing to roll up their sleeves, you got to do the part, or else you'll never get at, you'll never be able to make a decision on a complex solution.
Avoid the fear and do the homework. How about that? Last question. Someone? Third row.
On the notion of kind of momentum and inertia that we talked about, how do we bring what we're all experiencing here at a summit like this back to our companies? Because I heard the idea of the executive green team and things like that, but I come to these things all the time. I see the same people here. It's not the IT, it's not the financial analysts, it's not all of the people that we need to all come together to achieve
was just going to say, it sounds like you answered your question, but we got some additional insight. So how do you take the firepower and the passion that you're hearing today and the good ideas back and actually get some action? What do you think?
Well, I think you've got to find out who has the power. And in every organization, that's a little different. You know, it doesn't necessarily go with the title, but somebody makes things happen. Find out who that is and go talk to them and get them to do one bite at a time.
One bite at a time, find the power. How about
I
you,
would
Dave?
also, in addition to finding the power, I would look for the person who has the passion. And if you can get somewhere high enough up where you have both power and passion, that's when things can happen. So you need, we started something years ago trying to find advocates out in our markets because we're so dispersed and so diffused that we created something we call the Green Knights, which is kind of silly, but we have these Green Knights program that's around. And we have these people that whenever we need something, when we're applying for the Energy Star Partner of the Year and we need people to beat the
There's an
bushes
embargo,
to
you
get
can't talk
people-
about that.
Well, I'm not saying what happened. When we're out there beating the bush for this stuff, we rely on our Green Knights. When we have client input and things, we rely on the Green Knights. But we found people who are at a high enough level, because we couldn't just have, and I don't want to say this too, but we couldn't just have like a junior property manager. You had to have somebody who was like at a senior level, like a director of a marketplace. You had to have somebody who had both position and passion. And if you got enough of those people together, then you can make things happen.
Power, passion. What else, Sean?
Well, and power and passion, I think, are dead on. I think another initiative you should have, and I work with our brokerage group. I put together a sustainability practice group just for brokers. And then I happen to have Nick Stellatis, who's sitting here with us, speak on it last week, and I had him speak directly to what makes them money. You have to figure out what the carrot is for everyone and how they're involved and how taking a bite of this carrot is going to move them down the path that you're trying to move them on. I'm not trying to say manipulate them, but I am at this point in time. And having someone that you can bring into your organization, whether it's Dave or myself or Jim or Ray, that would talk to your group or talk to those people and say, this is why we're doing it and this is how it makes our company money or drives our marketplace. I think it's a very powerful statement. So I think education, but using the people in the industry to educate the people with the power and the passion.
Power, passion, education, carrots. Ray, last word?
Last word, be a hero. I think being safe is truly overrated. How do we give
Nice.
legs to this when we get home? What can you control? What you do, right? So be the change agent and take the initiative. If it falls on deaf ears and you don't get support for your project, it's okay, but you made an effort, you tried to make a contribution, you stood out, and there's not a lot of risk in that, right?
Be a hero. It's easy. Go do that. Thank you, everybody. Panel, great job.